Good evening, everyone. We're going to call to order the Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 meeting of the Board of Selectmen. We're going to open the meeting, do the pledge, and then take a recess to the reception for our new town manager, Robin Muxian. So if you'd all please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so now we will take a recess until about 8 o'clock p.m., and there will be a reception for our new town manager, Robin Muxian, in the Utanis room. Thank you.
The meeting of the Board of Selectmen for Tuesday, December 4th, 2018 will come back into order. This meeting is being broadcast live by Stoughton Media Access. It's also being recorded for future broadcast over SMAC and for viewing over the internet. I apologize for being late. I had a business meeting up on the North Shore, and somehow the traffic got in the way, so thank you all for starting the meeting without me. Let me welcome our new town manager, Robin Muxian. Nice to see you.
Great to be here.
And we're off to the races. Our next meeting will be, I know we're not ending this one, but for people who want to know what our next meeting is, our next meeting is December 11th. The primary business at the next meeting will be review and action, when appropriate, on renewals of license and permits in town. Our notice will indicate which holders of licenses and permits have requested renewals of them. You'll see that in the posted meeting agenda. Unless something comes up, we do not anticipate meeting again. After December 11th, the next meeting date would be December 18th. That would be an off week anyway. And then after that is December 25th. So we would probably not meet on Christmas Day, but, you know, if people are missing, want to get together, we'd be happy to do it. I'm anticipating that we will conclude all of the license and permit applications. And my reason for saying this in the beginning of tonight's meeting is that because we do not anticipate meeting again after December 11th, when we get to it this evening, there are a number of applications with missing information. Some of the information that is missing or incomplete is of a nature that we would not necessarily be able to grant a renewal of the license. And so what that means is, as of the close of December 31st, 2018, those license and permit holders whose applications are incomplete or not filed will not be able to exercise the license or permit that they thought they have. So, our office has been in consistent contact over the past month to get these applications completed and to fish out missing information. If you know of any business or license holder that you think, or you are a holder yourself and you are aware that you owe some information to us, please get it to us by Friday noontime, so it can be in our material for the December 11th meeting. We do not want to see any business in town not able to operate come January 1st because of a lapse. But unless we have a complete and accurate application, there's nothing we can do to prevent that. Now, Chief Laracy is in the room. He's not specifically on the agenda, but I wanted to see, rather than hold him, if there's anything he would like us to do.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I wanted to come before you tonight because I wanted to, on behalf of the fire department, personally thank you for moving the public safety building to town meeting for a vote last week. So it meant a lot to all of us. You made a promise that you would do that. You put together a site development team, which we all worked well together, got a number of sites, and we brought it before the town meeting. So I just wanted to personally thank you for doing that for us. And from here, we'll move on and we'll see what's next for all of us and go from there. But I just wanted to thank you.
Well, thank you. I think I speak for all five of us, even the guy who's not here, that we're not done yet. Our commitment to providing at least accommodations for Station 1 and recognizing the deficiencies in the police station and fixing both while interest rates are attractive. We're losing that opportunity while construction costs or before construction costs escalate further. We're committed to do that. So I think we all are grateful for the effort you put into it, and I hope you will agree with us. We're not done yet.
That's good to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an agenda item. If you'd like to stay behind, that's fine, but if you'd rather enjoy your family rather than us, we'll understand.
Well, I think I'm going to head home. It's been a long day since about 7 a.m., but thank you anyways.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
All right, so let's go back to the agenda. He wasn't on the agenda, and I didn't want to keep the chief if he had something to bring to our attention. On the agenda, the next item of business is citizens' comments. Any citizens' comments? Yes.
Cynthia Walsh, 1096 Park Street. On your agenda for November 20th, you had an executive session to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property, and blah, blah, blah. And item C was the public safety building. Yet, when, a week later, when it was presented to town meeting, I'm also a town meeting representative, precinct 2, it was on town-owned land, which doesn't seem to fit the definition for an executive session, because we weren't talking about purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. So, is there an explanation?
Is that a question?
Well, the question is, if one just goes by this, obviously I wasn't in the executive session, it would appear that the public safety building was not subject to the executive, any of the definitions for executive session.
Well, as was explained by Mr. Tisdale during the presentation, there was a site selection committee. The site selection committee had a number of criteria that were met. A number of properties were identified. 2 of the properties that were identified were privately owned properties.
And that was what was discussed in executive session.
And out of respect for the property owners and consideration for ongoing negotiations, those were properly executive session materials. When those 2 opportunities did not move forward was when the 3rd site, which is the site that was presented at town meeting, was identified.
Thank you for that. I thought that might be the reason, but obviously the public won't see anything until the executive session minutes are released, and since the other 3 buildings are still under consideration, that could be quite a while. I'd like to iterate my welcome to our new town manager and wish her all the luck in the world. I've lost track since I've lived in Stoughton since 1948. I have absolutely lost track of how many town managers we've had in my 70 years, so I'm sure, though, she'll be one of the best. And since you're only the 2nd female, The bar isn't that high. But welcome to Stoughton. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your explanation.
Any other citizens' comments?
Antonio Souza, Precinct 3, town meeting rep. I don't know if it's under your jurisdiction.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer?
Sure can.
Thank you.
I don't know if it is under your jurisdiction or the town moderator. And my concern, it's something that's been bothering me for a while, and I finally hit a point that I had to come up and present it. I have an issue with circulating nominating papers while town meetings in session. I don't have a problem being done prior, doing recess at the end of town meeting, but I have a problem with people circulating papers while town meeting is in session. I think it's disruptive, lack of respect for the town meeting representatives. Again, I don't know if it's under your jurisdiction or the town moderator.
I can answer that and say we have no jurisdiction over anything that goes on in town meeting. That's the moderator, and actually, town meeting sets its own rules. But all the Board of Selectmen does is formulate the warrant, make presentations and things that might happen, but the governance of town meeting is completely out of our jurisdiction.
So I should bring that up to town moderator and
That would be
see what he
where,
has to say?
my suggestion is where to start, and perhaps draft a rule to adopt at the opening of town meeting that no electioneering will be permitted between gaveling open and gaveling closed, which sounds like what it is you're looking for.
Okay, thank you. I also like to welcome our new town manager. Good luck, and I want to wish you all a happy holidays.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Seeing no one, so, well, seeing some of you, but seeing no one wanting to make another comment. So,
Well, here we go.
Ms. Muxian, here we go. Tell us everything we want to know.
I got it in 6 days. So just
So
briefly,
you're resting on the 7th?
and I'll rest on the second one. I don't get to rest tomorrow. I have to come into work. So I'll start briefly with just an update. You asked for a general transition update. First, let me say that the transition, I think, has been comfortable and smooth, but in no short part to the staff, particularly Mr. Tisdale, who has just been beyond accommodating. Beyond just generally personally accommodating, his knowledge and his understanding of the town is beyond helpful, and I will continue to look toward Mark as a huge resource for me. Generally, what we have done, and I've sent you a memo, transitioning from interim town manager to permanent town manager is generally progressing smoothly. Mr. Tisdale and I met prior to my swearing in. He briefed me on multiple departments, budget status, capital status, and general town protocol. Because the budget is a top priority, we've met continually with the budget team that he had put in place, so we kept the continuity of the team that he had put together last year. And it's allowed me to become really entrenched in the operation. So as much as it's a little challenging to come in the week before the first draft of the budget's due, it actually introduced me to every department in town, on paper at least at this point, and to understand where the priorities are, where the funding has been, and get a general look at how the town functions fiscally. It's been a crash course, without no question. And we will continue to work together on projects that are generally underway. We have the Buy-Ready Status Report. Mr. Tisdale, on projects like that he was directly involved with or handling, he will continue to do so until we close them out or we have a chance to pass the baton on them. So I'm very appreciative for that help. Mr. Tisdale is physically relocated back to his town engineering office. I don't think he can get down there soon enough to go back and be an engineer. And so that he can work back in that capacity, but he is readily at my right hand when I need him. More critically is that during this transition, we've discussed some overall restructuring in relationship to the originally proposed town manager position. We'll discuss this briefly a little more when I present the budget general assumptions tonight, and then more in-depth when it comes time. I understand that it was budgeted, and I understand Mr. Tisdale had put that in, assuming an HR or a labor function that he felt he might need some assistance with. And in looking at where I'm comfortable and where I feel my strengths are and where I would need assistance, that isn't the direction that I think we need to go. I would prefer to use talents that we have in-house, and we've talked from a transitional standpoint and in a long-term standpoint about some options to do that. And I think we can do it by saving the body of an assistant town manager. I think we can save a body, utilize resources we have better in town hall. To be honest, I prefer, it's more beneficial to me to have people who are here in that role than to bring in somebody that, and I don't even want a perception of having a team in this office and not a team with the directors when I have the talent here. So at this point, and you'll see this in the general presentation, we'll be looking to hold on that position, and in January, I'll give you a formal reconstruction or redistribution plan. But if we can save a body, we can save a body and a little money. But more importantly, that's part of the transition discussion is, what Mark had envisioned, and then more looking at where his talents and other people's talents lie, and where my talents are, and where I could use the supplement. And that's what I'd like to look forward to doing. I have had the chance to meet most of our town hall team, several members of our departments outside of town hall, including the police and fire chiefs. I had my first weekly staff meeting today. They will be weekly. I meet with my directors weekly. All directors come to those meetings. I think it's critical for open communication and dialogue, with an emphasis on the fact that there are no silos in town. So we are one team, and we go out there as one team. I call that my Thanksgiving table. We can fight it around the table. We can be a little dysfunctional maybe, but that's okay. And it's a healthy dialogue. So just so you understand the protocol of how I run sort of my little corner of the world, that weekly staff meeting is, I think, critical to morale and functionality. So we had that today. I'm beginning to set up meetings with labor leadership starting tomorrow to establish a rapport with our labor leaders and understand some of their concerns. Obviously, I've spoken with our police and fire chief about the fact that that would happen, and in the meantime, I will be setting up additionally individual department meetings with my individual directors. That's 20-something of them, I think, so that will take a little time to get through in the midst of budget, but I'm comfortable that we'll be able to do that. So I want to get the perspective from my directors, but I also want to sit with labor, and we're going to have some contracts coming up, so I think it's really important that we establish that rapport now and understand each other a little bit. So we'll do that this week. And so overall, the first week has been extremely busy, I believe productive. I will continue to work closely with Mark on projects that were underway as we either transition them to me or some that he will close out. So generally, that's my interim transition report for you, just to give you a sense. It's been somewhat informal, but we've been together constantly. So just briefly, a couple of announcements, if I may, from directors. FEMA filings for March 2nd and 3rd and March 13th and 14th. This is from Sue Herman, internal auditor, should result in a meaningful reimbursement. Documentations is currently being forwarded to FEMA. So we should be getting some FEMA money back from some storms. Chief Laracy is working on a storm form to ensure that we don't have any missteps with FEMA. I have seen them. It's a horror show, and one word wrong on a procurement document, and then you apply to FEMA and you don't get your money. So I'm really excited that the chief is taking that initiative, and I think that that will ensure that we don't have any missteps on FEMA, because it's a complicated process and it is bureaucratic.
How soon do you expect to hear on those numbers?
The numbers coming back, she did not give me a day. She said the filing report should result in meaningful reimbursement. I got the sense from her that we're hopeful within, I think, like within a couple months, within a month or two. Did you get that sense from her that it's imminent? Yeah, I think it's imminent.
Yeah, and that just shows up as free cash, right? It's a check we deposit, it goes to the general fund.
I think it's pretty much
I'm kind of looking at both you and Bill sitting right behind you, your shadow. Anyway, well, when you get an update, just...
Yep, we will fill you in on that.
Great.
On a completely different note, we'll go from storms to golf. Cedar Hill is currently quiet due to the weather. It has been a wet year. Gift certificate sales have begun, as well as spring equipment preparations. That is our update from the golf course. The this is important, Economic Development Office is still accepting applications for downtown storefront and sign improvement projects. So we encourage anybody and everybody who has a storefront to apply. Property and business owners can find information about the program on the town's website on the Economic Development page, or they can contact Pam McCarthy here at Town Hall. And very exciting, and Chief Laracy left, but the town's new ambulance went into service, and we are hoping to do a little ribbon cutting hoopla for it I kind of think things like this, we really want to bring out to the public. It's exciting. It's a large investment, but it's something that I believe we all feel sort of passionate about, and it's a public safety item, and so we'll celebrate it. So I like to celebrate these things. So we'll do a little ribbon cutting. I'll let you all know when, and
Can it be in the parade on Saturday?
I don't see why not. May have to leave if it's needed, but we might put that in the parade. I can work on that. That would be great. Put a big bow on it. It's our Christmas gift. Christmas gift, it's a holiday gift to the town.
Leave the sticker on it. Leave the sticker on it.
Sticker on it, yeah. So we're really excited about that. And speaking of the parade, from Tim Davis. Holiday Parade of Lights, Saturday, December 8th, begins at 5 o'clock. Street closures begin at 4:30 for anybody who will be driving around. At the conclusion of the parade from 6 to 8, O'Donnell Middle School, there will be a winter warm-up festival, free hot chocolate and cookies, musical and dance performances, and photos with Santa. So for more information, contact the Recreation Department. I am personally looking forward to the parade, so I can't wait. And from planning, Mark will give you an update in a little bit on the BioReady. So that will be the latest from there. Tax collector, Paula Newt, would like to remind all that water, sewer, and trash users that the second quarter FY19 utility bills due December 13th, 2018. Please make payments out on or before December 13th, 2018 to avoid a $5 demand fee and interest that accrues at a rate of 14% for unpaid balances. So utility bills are due. With that being done, I think it is time to do an initial presentation, a first blush at the numbers for the budget, and Sharon has my PowerPoint, and so let's see if we can pop that up.
I'm going to turn the TV in first. I'm going to get it over here.
It's remote control.
Oh, remote. See, I'm like, I don't use remote, I'm just like old-fashioned person. I still like to turn the channel.
Yeah.
I'm old. Here we go.
It's 5:30?
Somewhere. In California, right? It's 8:30 now, so it's 5:30 somewhere.
Right.
Little fire stick going.
Taking a nap.
No signal. No power.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Up.
We got that one. Oh, that one just popped up. Yep, you're on that one.
That's a little odd.
Can you close that?
We could probably just use the one screen tonight.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, just put it to slideshow.
But you should be able to close that screen.
Yeah, just pop it to slideshow and we're good.
Never seen that before.
Here we go.
It's there.
Okay, so first I want to thank the budget team. As I said, this was a group that Mark put together, and it included himself, Bill Rowe, obviously, our town accountant, as well as Mary Jane Martin, his assistant, Sue Herman, internal auditor, Maureen Doherty, and Paul Giffoon was also involved as a voice of reason. Any other voices of reason I can have are good ones. So I want to thank them, and I want to thank them for their patience with me going through this, because I asked a lot of questions that probably seem ridiculous, but it's the only way I could learn what's happening, and as I said, this was a great way to learn the town. General assumptions that are just sort of standard, reviewing year-to-date reports as we went through, reflecting accurate and true costs. I'd like to do that more aggressively next year when we look at performance-based budgeting. So we're looking at exactly what it is we're spending going into it. We couldn't really back up and do that at this point, but next year I'm hopeful to do that. Considering the impact of capital projects, are there infrastructure costs that are going to be associated with any capital projects that occur? I also wanted to consider things like GASB standards, so the Government Accounting Standards Board best practices. There are some things sometimes in budgetary practices that are looked on more favorably by GASB, and I wanted to ensure with Bill and Mark that we were complying with those things. Bond rating agency expectations and Massachusetts Department of Revenue, which Bill is giving me a crash course in Massachusetts DOR. And again, I think if we really look at those GASB practices, it becomes very beneficial for us for bond rating review down the road, and really working hard to maintain that bond rating so that we can continue to borrow at those interest rates, because it's critical. Next slide, Sharon. Okay. So generally, our goals: maintain town services. We always want to keep the quality of life for the people for whom we work. Incorporating any impact of contracts, and of course, we're not going to lay out a flat-out number of what that is, because part of our terms of negotiation are going to involve that. This is a little tricky, accounting for 26.2 pay periods, so this is a little expensive. The way the budget cycle works, or the pay periods work, every so many years you would almost gain a day, like a leap year. You would gain a pay period. And so apparently in the past several years, there's been a move to spread that out and make it a more actual cost, as opposed to carry this 0.1, 0.2, 0.1, 0.2, and then have a year where you basically have to make up a full pay period. This year is 26.2, which is the highest. It reduces to 26.1 in 2021, and I think it's 26.1 for another year, and then it goes back to 26. It probably, Susan and I were trying to sort of roughly figure it, and she will get me an accurate number when we move forward with the final presentation to you. But that difference is probably close to $400,000 or $500,000 on the budget, so it's significant. Reducing non-emergency overtime. So at this point, when we have a tight budget like this, and we're currently at a point of trying to close a significant shortfall in preliminary numbers, my belief is that we only have emergency overtime. Overtime should not be for getting work done that you didn't get done in time in your 8-hour day. Overtime is for crisis situations. Obviously, first responder overtime is based on manning. But, you know, if we need overtime in a division because of water main breaks, we do that, obviously. But we want to really keep a check on non-emergency overtime and put a bit of a moratorium on that. Using $150,000 in free cash, as was discussed in town meeting. That's incorporated into this right now. And assuming a growth of about $725,000, the average over the last 10 years was $746,000. So for now, we've put a placeholder in of $725,000. Let's see, next slide. Fiscal 2020 budget team continued reducing fire overtime, so we've hired, and that should have an offsetting, a corresponding savings on the overtime budget. I talked to Chief Laracy. At this point, he's pretty comfortable with a savings of about $150,000 on the budget, reducing what he had preliminary put in. So you will see a shaving down of that of about $150,000 in savings. Implementing a hiring freeze, and this is for, of course, non-first responders. And this is really more part of an overview by me at this point to get a handle on just what we have, what we don't need, what we need. The restructuring that I was referencing earlier, this is not like a scary moratorium. It's more a case of I just need to get a sense of what we really need, and maybe we restructure, maybe we don't hire, maybe through attrition we reduce some areas. But for now, until we get a better handle on it, we're just going to put a temporary freeze of no new positions or positions being filled in the budget. And in many ways, I feel sort of the assistant town manager position was part of that, and that if I'm going to set that example that we're going to look to trim, then we look to trim and we take advantage of what we have here.
Does that mean that you're not hiring an HR person?
No, at this point, no, we're not. And I'm pretty comfortable with going that direction at this point. Let's see. Offset buyout costs with reasonable gaps in time for posting. So people put in anticipated buyouts, severance packages, if you will, whatever's unpaid or paid vacation, whatever it is that people take when they retire. More often than not, those are not used or not necessary, because there's a gap in the time of that person's departure and the hiring between the posting and everything else. So the salary line item, more often than not, picks that up. In some cases, we left it if we were pretty sure we'd have a significant number of retirements. In other areas where we weren't even sure if there would be any, that $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 really could be offset in a matter of a few weeks of delay on the hiring. And so we don't want to double count that money in a budget this tight. Incorporating the school budget as it was initially presented, and we're hopeful that there will be some reductions on that. The school did come in with a 5.7% increase at this point initially, but I don't know if that's been discussed or being further discussed.
It's been revised since then.
Okay, so we didn't incorporate any of those changes at this point. So we're certain we'll be working with them, and I hope to sit down soon with the superintendent, anyway. Assuming the 2.5 overall increase plus growth. And a couple of changes in sort of reconstructing in the budget. The snow removal account, so has traditionally been underfunded, and there's this thing that I'm learning about that comes with this sort of deficit reduction plan for your snow removal. I'm really uncomfortable with not budgeting what it really is, and basically all we're doing is borrowing from ourselves to remove snow, and that just doesn't seem like a prudent practice. So we're not going to put it all in this year, but you'll see the snow removal account reflect what I think is a more reasonable snow removal figure, and there's an offset on the deficit that we have to pay ourselves. It's just a more real calculation. And again, I'm concerned when the auditors come in and the rating agencies that I want to make sure that we can point to all of these things very clearly. And that was kind of a murky item in the budget to me. Secondly, the revolving accounts, and we didn't show this in the draft that you have tonight, but it is something that I'm going to be putting in with the team to the final draft that we present you. Right now, there are a couple of departments that have carryover funds. It's just not a typical practice to do that, and I understand the departments that generate revenue like to hold on to it, but the reality is for town government to work, some departments don't generate revenue and others do. And effectively, that revenue really should all go into the general fund. There are carryover accounts right now. We will look to absorb that money, but it will be one-time, it's under the miscellaneous, one-time revenues. So we're not going to have a budget hole because we're not going to use it for, recurring expenses. But I do think we should absorb those back. In no way does it mean that departments can't buy what they need, and when we do performance-based budgeting next year, they can still request all the things they need, but it really should not be a separate carryover miniature reserve account. That money all should come back and reconcile with the town. So that is not reflected in this budget right now, but we will propose it going forward. We're looking to transfer $100,000 out of the health trust to fund OPEB. And that conforms with what we have to do, just confirming the Department of Revenue that we can make that transfer out, that's an appropriate use. I think Bill was going to talk to his contacts up there. I am concerned that we have, I believe it's $10,000 in OPEB, and we need to fund that. That's going to be a black eye for us down the road. And again, I think that'll wave a red flag at rating agencies. So it's OPEB, other post-employment employment benefits. The practice is, in more often than not nationwide, to start funding those aggressively. It will become very quickly a major unfunded deficit, a deficit hole, a major unfunded liability that will hurt us. So the health trust is pretty healthy. It's solid, and I think without question, Bill and I and Mark have talked that we're pretty confident it can absorb that without any problems. On a similar note, we're looking to reduce the contribution rate for employees and the town into the trust. So right now that trust has been growing. Bill, right? Am I correct? It has been growing every year. So that trust is what we pay our claims out of. We have stop-loss insurance, so we know that we will not have some exorbitant, $500,000, $600,000 claim that will wipe out a big hunk of that trust. And given that it continues to grow, the concern, actually, next slide, Sharon, can you pop to the next slide?
Sure.
Thanks, yeah. Given that it's continuing to grow, it means in some ways we're overfunding a little, and that money comes from the approximately 30% copay that the employees pay and the 70% that the town is required to match. So by reducing that contribution, it reduces the actual outlay that the employee makes, and it reduces the town contribution, which effectively saves us a little bit of money. We're confident that the trust can withstand that, and it really comes down at this point, are we holding a little excess money, and in an effort to keep as much money as we can in the taxpayers' hands that we don't need to take, and we have a secure trust, then it's prudent, I think, to let that money sort of go back. And in some cases, we have people who are almost getting hit twice because they're employees who live in town. So they're paying a little more than they need to as the employee paying 30%, but then as a resident, they're sort of paying a little more on the town tax dollar that they're paying. So it's not going to be a significant, it won't be a huge amount of money, but it will be a little bit of money that you'll see as a line item. And again, it's just trying to keep track of every dollar that we're putting in. Next slide, Sharon. Thanks. I mentioned reconstruction management operations, eliminating the assistant town manager position, redefining department roles to utilize in-house talent to its fullest, and allowing for potential reduction of outside contracting. And for Mr. Hill's question, no, I'm not looking to hire directly an HR person at this point. That's actually a function I like to take a strong involvement in myself, and where I will be able to maybe delegate some of the work that I would need to ensure that I can spend the time that I would need to on that is part of that restructuring with in-house. And I'll get you a full outline of the shifting of responsibilities to show that I'm comfortable, that will work. We're coming into contract negotiations. That's really a process that I usually do directly with my department directors initially, and then at the table myself. So I'm pretty comfortable with that, and that's a role I've typically taken the lead on labor and HR roles.
In conjunction with town council, right?
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes. Town council wouldn't necessarily be at every meeting, but any proposals I was going to make, any language that I was going to TA, sign any tentative agreement, absolutely council would be included.
Yeah, I see that missing HR position, a real gap in the town right now. I think we should talk about that.
Yep. I'm happy to.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it needs to be an assistant town manager, but I think there's a glaring issue with HR.
Another practice that, part of the restructuring, but one that's more notable in the budget is the economic development coordinator right now is listed under the town manager budget. That almost makes it look like sort of an also-ran. And it's really important, I think, to me and the direction that I sense from the board that we're looking about downtown redevelopment and really good growth and industrial redevelopment. And I think it's critical even from the impression of developers coming in from the outside that our economic development department is seen as that, a credible, viable, standalone department. It's just basically a title change, but I think it elevates the status and shows that as a clear and distinct department. And it sends a message that we're committed to this. So that's just an aside. There's not a financial impact on that, but just something that I thought you should be aware of. Best practices continued, reduction. Next one, Sharon. Let's see. I'm trying to learn how to, one more. Reduction and elimination of subsidy of enterprise funds. So budget-wise, that shouldn't be happening. We should not be subsidizing enterprise funds. We can pay general fund money in to offset, or actually we should be charging out to offset time the directors are spending in those enterprise funds. And we haven't even looked at whether or not we're going to tweak those numbers a little bit, because right now I think the town's probably covering more percentage than it probably should be for the enterprise funds. But we were able to eliminate the sewer subsidy with no associated rate increase through some minimal cuts that I think will not impact the operation of it at all. And that way, I think it's a $42,000. I think we saved about 50 some odd thousand in cuts, and the town was subsidizing 42,000 over to that. That really just isn't, it's not really an acceptable practice if we can avoid it, and there's really no need for us to do it if they can make the numbers work. So we will not be doing that, or at least we're proposing not to. And we're reducing the Cedar Hill subsidy. Eventually, it should be a self-sustaining, something like that, that's on a per-use basis, effectively has the ability to be self-sustaining. And we want to look more at marketing, corporate sponsorships, and really get some creative minds, work with economic development. Again, this is a function of economic development. Our golf course manager is great at managing a golf course, and that's huge. But marketing that golf course, I think, is going to take sort of a joint effort. And I'd like to look at more creative ways to do that. We're reducing the request back down. We're level funding, I should say, what we're going to provide the golf course this year, which is a little less than what he requested. It's actually half of what he requested, I believe. But again, we're going to look to do offset with marketing and programming, and I want to get recreation a little more involved in that. But again, that should be a pretty self-sustaining. That golf course should be at some point pretty self-sustaining. And I know weather impacts in a horribly wet spring and a horribly wet summer and an awful early winter. Those are just sort of the unexpecteds that you try to plan for in a budget, but can't always. Next slide. So here's kind of the ugly news. See, she doesn't want to give me the ugly news. So last week when we started, when we sat down, we had greater than $5 million of a gap. That's a pretty ugly number. After a week, we are now at $4 million. And again, that's assuming schools, at what they initially put in. I think the total increase was 5.9%, Bill, approximately. The total increase was a 5.9% increase. Obviously, we have a huge way to go. We have a huge way to go. But we'll get there, and we will find a way to do that. Next slide. The good news, there is good news, because we always like to end with a little bit of good news. The good news is that the town really has some stability. The multipurpose stabilization fund is at $4.7 million. The free cash is at $3.7 million. That's at approximately $8.4 million of unrestricted funds, and I'm beginning to learn how those work, how those two work a little bit differently. But effectively, the town sits with an $8.6, $8.5 million rainy day fund effectively, and that's healthy, and that's a good sign for the town. Capital stabilization fund is at $2.3 million, and fire apparatus stabilization fund is $75,000. So that's some happy news. And Sharon, one more on the good news. And I know this isn't, an earth-shattering number, but I think it's our commitment to the taxpayers to look at every single dollar we can. So we looked at some modest reductions in operating expenses and staffing and water, nothing that will impact the general safety and compromise the quality of the water. And I think we can actually do a 1% decrease in rates. It's going to be minimal on people's tax bills. It may be negligible, but it's still their money. And every penny we don't have to take, we don't need to. And since it's the enterprise fund, it wouldn't be money that would help to offset the general fund anyway.
But it would be money to offset the construction costs for a lot of projects that get expensed out of those funds. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. And when we start looking general at capital, what should be more in capital versus
Well, but
where we have
appropriately
operating.
so. If you're going to do a Park Street sewer, other projects that are that come out of the enterprise fund has a line for debt service.
Yes.
And there's a lot of things that have to be paid off there. So
So
both in sewer and water.
yeah,
Just,
sewer we didn't do anything with at this point. We left sewer. We just cut it down to where we weren't subsidizing it.
Can I ask a question?
You just did.
I got another one.
Go ahead.
Why does it take 3 questions to get an answer?
I don't know. You a lawyer?
I think I'm dealing with a lawyer.
No.
So this is a terrific presentation, and thank you. You've absorbed an awful lot on the run. One of the ground rules, or one of the budget assumptions that we set forth right at the beginning of the process, I didn't see it here, and I don't want it to be, kind of a you understood kind of a thing, but we said that this budget would be level serviced, okay? And that means no new positions. That means what we have today is what we're budgeting for next year. And then if people had wants and needs above and beyond that, then it was in a parking lot, and we'd look at those separately, but we wanted to get this year's budget rebudgeted based on the variable costs that are affected, your contracts and things of that nature, healthcare costs and, other joint costs. But I just wanted to make sure that that's the premise you folks are working from.
Yeah, other than the hiring of the police and fire were the only.
Yeah. Like when you say snow, that concerns me, just because, what if we have $2 million in snow this year, and you're going to budget that next year, and it's a $500,000 snow year? Now you've got $1.5 million sitting in that account that's just, that's tied up that you can't reuse again. Anyways, that was the whole purpose. The state gave you the latitude to do that for a reason. Just a thought. And you can now finance that over 1 or 2 years. No, that's done? That one-time deal? So anyways, just a thought. But when I said level serviced,
Yes.
That's what I meant.
And I think if you look, we pretty much leveled, yeah. I mean, in fact, some of the little chipping away in the sewer was a clerk position that was vacated, and that was distributed. I think it was 11,000 over 4 different line items. That's zeroed.
So for example, that $800,000 that special town meeting just approved for the water treatment sewer the plant, is going to come out of debt service from those enterprise accounts.
Yeah.
So, or retained earnings, whatever.
And we did not hit the debt service line item at all. And
Yeah.
I knew we'd have that discussion.
Yep.
So that debt service line item stayed exactly where it was after the
I think you
conference
could,
call.
I think you mentioned you budgeted like 2.5 more than you, 250,000 more than you needed, so I think it was 4.
Right,
You had
and
four-
we left it at that, I
4,250.
think we left it at that
Yeah.
point because we had discussed keeping that in there
Yep.
for any overages that we might hit.
Is that it?
I think I'm done.
You've been here a whole week,
Want
and
to hear me
that's,
talk some more? I think you heard enough from me tonight.
it's amazing,
Well,
amazing.
I'm lucky I had a good team. This was such a learning experience for me. And there are things that will follow through, there are things that are going to change by the final draft, but at least to give you a blush, yeah, that number's big, that gap. But again, schools there'll be some movement, I'm sure, with the schools significantly, and we're still in a conservative mode on this. And I think there's going to be some room all over the place, and we're still waiting on some state numbers that may change this a bit. So there'll be this will close significantly. But this literally came off of last week, 5 million, now it's 4 million in 5 days between doing other things, 5 days of shaving it. But again, I have to say that the team was wonderful, and I'm really lucky
Good.
to have that.
Any more questions, Mr. Hill?
Well, just some recognition, and the chairman has already made this note, but the fact that our town accountant, and with the help of our treasurer, has been able to now get free cash certified and all of our end-of-year reporting done timely, we can get this process started when it should be started. You've got a great assistant accountant now in the office, which is a huge bonus. You didn't have that from before. You know, it was always a resource issue, you know, for the town accountant, and bringing in consultants, and, you know, just never been able to get it done. And certainly, you know, Mark has a wide breadth of understanding of that process now, Paul Jaffoon, although we'd like to see Paul get back to building the buildings, but, you know.
Yeah, but he's been invaluable in this as well. His common sense and insight, and he has sort of a unique view of all departments, given his job.
Yeah.
And I also think you hit on something with contracts, and I mentioned it briefly. We reduced some of our outside contract costs, but I really believe we can reduce more. Again, when we look at the talent that's in-house and the staffing that's there, and you mentioned the assistant accountant, she's been amazing. I mean, we sat and literally just hammered out numbers until, I don't know, 3 o'clock today we broke up, and she and Bill, by 5 o'clock, had those numbers for me. So that's the quality of people we're working with.
And quite frankly, that was the vision.
Yeah,
You know,
and it
that
worked.
That's how it would work, and the workflow, et cetera. The
And it-
people
and
in
it
their
worked.
place, making the
Yeah.
right decisions timely, getting out in front of it a lot sooner. So, good stuff.
Yeah, I'd be worried if I was looking at this number 3 weeks from now.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be really worried. Right now, I mean, I'm not thrilled, but
Well, last
I'm
year,
not
we were
panicked.
looking at this number in January.
Yeah.
Mark?
yeah. So
So he's not worried at all.
Mark's totally chilled now.
This is old hat for him.
Right.
But we'll get there. And yeah, it looks large right now, but again, we are still in a conservative mode. We did not go through and knife it completely at this point.
Right. And the Finance Committee was just so gracious last year to work closely with us to help bring this into balance, you know,
Yep.
based on the changing numbers and such a close, tight time frame, and that was a huge help. So
And there
hopefully
are
we're going to hand
moving
off to them,
targets.
you know, balanced product, so.
Thank you. Yeah, and there are moving targets on this and some of those healthcare numbers and whatnot, too.
I didn't mean to monopolize all of our time. Sorry.
So,
Steve?
Oh, I thought you said so. I didn't.
yeah, is that Miss Howe? I'm sorry.
I don't have any
will
questions.
enunciate better.
Are we on selectmen comments? or-
No, any questions for the town manager?
No, I just wanted to point out that in the very first slide, one of the items was to maintain the quality and level of service. So I think that was considered in the budget, and just wanted to point that out. I look forward to seeing the future revisions and discussing some of the changes. So thank you.
Mr. Cavey?
No questions. Really excellent presentation. The only thing I would really would love to have a conversation with you. We can do it publicly, or we can all speak privately. But I think that you're coming at this, it appears like with a very clear philosophy of what you're trying to accomplish. And so that we don't inadvertently undermine that, it would be good to have just a really open conversation about the approaches that you're taking, what priorities stand out to you, which don't. There's a lot of people working independently, and I would just hate to see there being sort of confusion. So I'll probably reach out at some point. We just have a conversation about the things that are driving your decision making, and I'll stand behind that. Thank you.
Thank you.
As the last one up, also thank you for this overview. Mr. Hill I think is good to emphasize that the policy directive on the budget, which I think we adopted in October, was for level service funding. And the expertise you bring to this, we're hoping will allow us to maintain level service and recognize some of the challenges we have in funding. This board has, an aggressive view of getting things done that have been put off for too long, that put us further behind the starting line in a lot of things. Public service building is one of them. And what we want to make sure as we go through this process, with your help, is that we identify if there are changes in how we're providing the services, that the public is aware whether it's going to affect the service quality. To the extent that you prepare and present the budget and there are changes, you explain how you've determined the level of service, how you are identifying that the level of service is not going to be affected because there are changes in staffing or management of the delivery of the services. Because, any change can be perceived as detrimental, and especially for some of the services that people rely upon. I think it'll be very helpful as we go through this process. Last year was difficult, the year before was difficult, and we all expected this year to be more of a challenge. So if you can start off with, when you're going through the budget, this is the level of service that is being provided. We're going to do that, and there'll be changes in how we do that to make it work. Because if it's such that there might be some adjustment in the level of service or quality of service that has to be made in order to make the ends of the rope meet on the budget, we should do that up front, because we will want feedback from the public, I think, before we vote the budget. I'm anticipating, like we did on the special town meeting, that if we have the time in the process that we didn't have before, to open the budget before we vote the budget for some form of public comment. And all of that sort of preliminary, this is the level, this is how and this is how we're changing the delivery to meet budget constraints, but the service is not going to be changed. That will help that end of the cycle, so people don't misinterpret. If there's a cut of a staff member, but it's not going to affect how the service is rendered, we can deal with that first, so that we can educate before we frustrate the public.
And absolutely, and if I could respond briefly, none of the cuts involve bodies that are currently in place. So whatever service is or is not being provided is not going to change by that. I think everything we cut were basically positions that were funded that are currently empty. So it's basically more of a no posting of new positions than a reduction of somebody who's already there. There's not going to be one less snowplow driver, for example, or one less mechanic to fix that truck. Those are those primary public-facing services that I believe we've held completely intact at this point, and are going to maintain as absolutely best as we can, because that's the immediate quality of life question. So yeah, absolutely, and that directive is well heard.
Yeah, I was pleased that you've begun the initiative of meeting with the leaders of the bargaining units to get those relationships going. We will have on our executive session agenda for next week an item to deal with collective bargaining because the contracts come up. And I think a common goal is to have those, if it's possible, have those ready for ratification by town meeting. And that means we have to get going. So to the extent you're able, we can't really get into it in an open session, but I want the public to be aware, since it's going to be on the agenda, that you're reaching out to the leaders of the bargaining units is a critical first step in our collective work to get these contracts closed in a timely manner. And if they see on the executive session next week that we will be talking about it, it is the first step in this process for us.
And typically, my goal with contracts is if they end on 30 June, that we have another one in place. And doesn't always happen, and sometimes things can get sticky at a table. But for the most part, I do try to get, as long as those requests to embark on negotiations come, I do try to get those rolling. And I don't like to have a delay, and then you have to do back pay or catch up, and that's just not prudent.
Right. So thank you. And if that's all you got, it's more than enough. Thank you. On Selectmen's comments, let's start at Mr. Cavy's end of the table.
No comments, thank you.
Ms. Howe.
I just wanted to thank the town meeting representatives, town staff, town moderator, and the rest of the board for attending and participating in the special town meeting. I know it was difficult with it being after the Thanksgiving holiday, but we had really good turnout and conversation, and I think the board and the town meeting learned a lot, so looking forward to the spring. Thanks.
Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, I did that again. I'm sorry. I've gone like 9 meetings without messing that up. I'm sorry.
So it almost seems like that special town meeting was like a month ago. But anyway, some of us were able to attend the SMAC Awards on Friday night, which were terrific. Well done. And, want to thank, Michael Hammond and Jeff and David and the team down there for doing such a terrific job for us in the town. So, and the other thing is that there was a Friends of Seniors Luncheon on Saturday, which was, they do such a great job and probably unsung heroes, but it's very impressive what they do, for the seniors for that lunch. They do it twice a year. Last year, this event got snowed out because of a huge snowstorm. But it was just nice to be able to be there, see it, and see all the good and the joy that it brings. So anyways, those are my 2 cents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cavey. Oh, no, Mr. Hill. I was able to attend the SMAC Awards. To add to something Mr. Hill said, one of the things that you get from going to these events is to appreciate the amount of volunteer contribution that the folks at this community television station put together and the quality of the programming that they produce for us. There's what was emphasized, that there's a lot of room for members of the community to produce more programming and encouragement from the staff, including Michael Hammond, to get involved. So essentially, if you see something that if there's something you can't see on local television that you think belongs there, there's room to do it, and everyone in the community is welcome down at Stoughton Media Access to help produce your programs. On the Friends of Seniors event, these are events that I've been fortunate enough to go to most of the time since I've been on the boards. They are just tremendous contribution to the community. One of the things that I'd like to ask the board to do on to deal with recognition of the seniors picks up on a project that Mr. Hill is working on, which is to develop a presentation on how we're going to manage our much-needed capital programs without breaking the backs of the members of the community, and particularly the seniors, and in particular with respect to the recent debt exclusion to allow us to build the high school, to make sure that folks, particularly the seniors who built the town and maintained the town we all live in, because it's a town I moved into that two of us were born into, and they were the folks who had the town here when we got here, that we make sure they can stay here and that they're comfortable. I've asked the town manager to request staff to assemble tools, resources to provide. There are a number of tax deferral, tax relief, and other programs for seniors. We went through a number of these during the time when the high school program was on. Some of them may or may not include action required by town meeting. And one of the things I asked the manager to look at with staff is, are there opportunities to deal with the tax pressure, particularly on seniors, that may not be available to us statewide, that through a home rule petition we might be able to adopt on our own, because the seniors in our town shouldn't feel threatened at all by the progress we're trying to make. And one of the ways to do that is to make sure we have and tell them about tools that are available. So the telling about is another thing that I asked the manager to look into, which is after the first of the year, when we're through the holidays, to set up several Saturday morning programs at the senior center, so that we can have interaction as a board with the seniors to hear them, and staff it with perhaps the veterans agent and town staff. And I will try to recruit some accountants, although it's the beginning of their busy season, to work with folks so that if they have eligibility for any of these relief programs, we can assist them in applying and getting the applications in and getting them eligible. And as a listening exercise, so we can hear what it is they need. And looking ahead to the fact that our warrant closes at the end of January, if that gives us a chance to put together a home rule petition to address their needs, that we do it. And we'll have more of this hopefully at the first meeting in January for what these are. We'll pick up with the information packet from the high school building and package that together.
That's already underway, so let's not duplicate efforts, and once that's done, we just pass it to you. You can pass it to your department heads and then take a look at where there might be gaps. But we thought a critical piece of this is that there is a resource, and whether it's the Council on Aging, which we thought maybe there was somebody on staff there that could, or the library, with a bunch of the programs they have available, that we have resources available to particularly the seniors that are going to need help navigating through these things, because some of them are just not easy. So let me update that, which we're halfway through doing, and then send that off because it was part of the revenue plan as well. And then we also think that there's something moving through the state to have a resource available to people to be able to call as well for help and assistance on this. So.
But the bottom line is the people who made the town such a great town when we got here, whether you were born here or moved here, we want to make sure that that they can't possibly feel that the progress we want to make is something that they should not join us in. And I think we can do that based on what I'm aware of programs are. This is not the time to dig into them and to schedule listening sessions with them. If the library is open, by then, it would be a tremendous opportunity for them to see that new facility, feel welcome in the facility, and host it there. But that's, if it's all right with all of you, we'll move on setting those up in January. All righty?
Right. So the revenue or the capitalization program that I'm building here is to make sure that we can navigate around a debt exclusion. It's not my intention to propose that at all. So the board may feel differently, but I don't. And it looks like we're currently building a model that'll sustain that. We're not there yet. We've got another week or two worth of work to go, and then we should be able to kind of roll this out internally and kick it around and see what people think.
Great. Thank you. So moving on to the business at hand, item 5, request for a zoning change. So here's a bit of irony. In the special town meeting, there was a zoning article, and there were a number of questions, the gist of which were, where did this come from and why is it here? And then I want to say Thursday of last week, I got a call from a lawyer in Brockton who represents a party that has an interest in some property in Campanelli Industrial Park where they would like to construct solar power, I don't know if you call it generating, but a solar power array. And we have an overlay district for solar generation, but it is not in the Campanelli Industrial Park. The request came to the Board of Selectmen. Under a state statute, requests for zoning changes come to a Board of Selectmen in a town, and we refer them to the Planning Board for a hearing. The hearing has to be held once we refer it to them within 40 days. And then the statute says that they report back to us whether their recommendations might be. It's on the agenda tonight because if we do anything with this, and it's timely, and this is a business opportunity that would generate tax revenue for the town, it is something that we should not pass up. The timing would be such that the public hearing, if we refer it, could be concluded in time for reasonably for the planning board and the planner to prepare a decent warrant article for us to consider in the town warrant. But there's not a whole lot of wiggle room for those steps to occur. So my request would be that for a motion to refer the request for expanding the solar overlay district to this particular lot, Assessor's Map 89, Lot 142. And so we'll make that referral because our requirement is to refer a request. Is there a motion?
So you need a motion to request
A
this.
motion to refer this to the planning board.
So I'd like to make a motion to refer this amendment to the solar array solar overlay district to include property in Campanelli Industrial Park, Assessors Maps 089-142, and referral to the planning board for a hearing pursuant to General Laws, Chapter 40A, subsection 5, Section 5.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I just had one thought. What is the current overlay district for the solar panels?
It's essentially at the recycling facility, the old dump.
That's the only
That's
location?
the only location.
Did we have any zoning changes that were adopted when we got the Green Communities designation? Do we know?
That was, I think having that was part of it.
Okay. Because I know some communities have adopted residential solar panels by right and other solar panels in commercial districts by right. And I just wonder if this is, one example of a few others that might pop up that we'd want to look a little further into to propose in conjunction with this, as opposed to having just one parcel show up and then 6 months later another parcel and 6 months later and so on. So,
Well, you read my mind because now the requirement under the statute is that we refer a request
right.
to the planning board, but that opens up, frankly, one of the items in the list of, all this stuff is related. One of the items in the list of potential warrant articles from the engineering department, I think it's engineering, is for the Park Street Campanelli Industrial Park and surrounding area sewer system. So there's a view that a solar array sitting on land that is zoned industrial, when a solar array sitting on a building that is productive and zoned industrial, is probably less desirable than we want, right? I'd rather have a solar array on top of a factory than a solar array on the ground. And if you look at the map and what we've heard concerning Campanelli Industrial Park is a reason that park is underbuilt and underutilized is the lack of sewer into the park. One of the reasons we've been, all of us, trying to get the Park Street sewer built is because of the increase in tax revenue we will get particularly from Campanelli Industrial Park, but also from economic development along Park Street down to the Brockton line, all of which requires sewer to work because of the number of, and there are even sites along that way that, let's just say in the warmer weather, have their own fragrance, right? And so that's needed. This triggers the question of what do we do and how do we do it? It triggers, to me, do we want to ask for the solar overlay district to be expanded to more desirable places? Because if there's places to put it that we don't now include, that's more tax revenue that we get from the sun. And so my thinking is that we should ask the planner to report back to us and to hold public hearings on zoning revisions for potential enlargement of the zoning overlay district to all areas where it be appropriate to do it, and see what we get. And to support, the second step would be to support the expansion of the sewer into that area, because right away this tells you that the highest and best use for that lot is probably a building that's producing things in it as a factory, not a solar array by itself, but a solar array might go on it. And so I wanted to kick those out, picking up on what you suggested to see what you might want to do it, because I don't think it would be unfair to refer the whole question, on that we're prompted by this, the whole question to the planner, and ask her to report back at the first meeting in January on, and I think this would also be something that the economic development officer and the town engineer and the town manager would weigh in on, and just give us a concept look on where we could go with this to max out the locations for this.
Yeah, and I don't think we'd have to necessarily reinvent the wheel. I mean, any community that's pretty much gotten the green communities designation had to adopt some type of zoning change to allow for, generation or something in a commercial district or residential, solar or wind. So there are examples out there and they exist. So we could find some communities and particular zoning districts that would match up nicely with an overlay district for the solar arrays. So I think that's a great next step. That's what I was kind of thinking. So, because to do them piecemeal doesn't quite make sense.
No, and what would be good to do is to promote overall expansion of the industrial and commercial tax base. One of the ways to do that would be to enhance the economic viability of these developments. So if a solar array on somebody's roof and the rent that would be received for the solar array on a roof would make a difference for an investor to put in to build the building, it's worth it to us to promote that, because, my own view is the solar arrays, it's my personal view, they're being designed now, they're being managed now so that they don't affect abutting properties, and it's good all around.
I think the town worked with a company down in Campanelli. I could be wrong. I think I've mentioned this before, that there was a pilot program for solar array that was installed on a building down there. That reminds me, we should check on what are those energy credits, how they're being accounted for and used, if they're showing up and just being credited off the bill, or how that works. I'm not sure, but again, that was a payment in lieu of taxes program, not. And I don't think we had to change the zoning to do that, but it was. But it went in. There's something down there already, which is good.
But the overlay district does not extend onto Campanelli or any other industrial site. Another example I would use is the Target building. That's a gigantic building. I want to say that's a 175,000 square foot building.
Which one?
Target,
Target, yeah.
including the garage.
Amazon as well, right?
And, if our overlay bylaw allowed, if not encouraged, the development of these sites, the value to the town and the tax base and to the property owners could well be good. I don't know. It just occurs to me that it's worth us asking for a report back and see where it goes. It's like, if we're going to expand the district, we should do it right the first time, or at least try to.
Is there any time limitation for us on this project out of Brockton, or?
Well, there's no time limit. They've asked us, we can refer it. This is just my personal view. If we have a business owner in town who is asking us for a zoning change to improve his property or their property and the business and therefore the tax base, we should investigate it and report back. And if it's something for reasons we don't want to do, we should tell them. I'm not sure there's time for them to do a petitioned article. But if the sense of the board is that this is a project we think would be desirable and we want to know more, I think we've voted to send it to the planning board. So the next step, separate from that, would be to send a bigger question to the planner and the planning board and ask for a report back.
Well, we got a motion. Need a
Did
second?
I do a vote? Did we do a vote on referral to the planner for the array?
For
No?
this?
Yeah.
No, not
All
yet.
right, so on the motion to refer this request for solar array overlay district expansion to the property at Assessor's Map 89, page 142, which is in Campanelli Industrial Park near Connell Drive. All in favor?
Did we get a second on that?
I seconded that.
Second it?
All in favor?
Aye.
So that's 4-0. On the next question as to whether we will direct the planner, the manager, the engineer, and the economic development officer to report back on desirable locations to expand the overlay district, is there a motion?
So made.
Second.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. And since you have a lot of zoning experience, I thought you might be able to answer this pretty quickly. But why is the solar power overlay district, why is that overlay zoning different than just maybe being a by right use for, say, industrial and general business?
I think there's two reasons for overlay districts. One reason is that it's easier to get an overlay district approved because it does not impinge on the current underlying zoning. So property owners, businesses in the district do not get a sense that what they are now doing would be affected by the zoning change. If we look back at the special town meeting, there was a misperception that the zoning change to residential would affect the current use of the property as GB, even though a current use being exercised under an existing zoning bylaw is not affected by a zoning change. It's the change in use, not the change in owner. So that's one problem, is that it doesn't make it doesn't threaten or make someone feel that the underlying zoning use is changed. And the other one, it allows the placement of that overlay district in various areas of the town without affecting the primary zoning. So it would be possible to put this overlay district in a general business, in industrial, theoretically in a residential area, because it would overlay the primary zoning. And so you have the flexibility of applying these kinds of uses as not a primary use, whereas industrial, general business, residential, those are primary uses, and you're only allowed one primary use at a time.
Sure. Thank you. Those
You
are the
can,
questions I
you
had.
can wake up now.
Oh, it's exactly what I was looking for. You know,
If you want to go to sleep, ask me a zoning question.
especially with some of the issues that we've seen crop up from inadequate or inappropriate zoning. During last year, when we saw a plant that wanted to open up across from their middle school, that seemed like a good place to put a lot of solar panels. You know, it would be pretty innocuous, and would actually send a pretty healthy message to the students across that were right there.
Yeah, I mean, what we learned on that site is that the building itself is now highly challenged and may be a tear down. I'm not pretending to know that it is, but,
Yeah.
and this might encourage that recycling without, so.
no trucks going through to transport the solar power, right? There's also
And free delivery.
free delivery. We have some land that in prior decades before, perhaps some of the environmental impacts of chemicals and whatnot were fully understood on how they could affect an area. We have some areas of town that are polluted, and they're what could be used and what could be done in those areas. It's problematic. Once again, putting some solar panels over property that might otherwise be really unusable, to be honest, might be a good use of that land. So I was just wondering if it became something that could be used, could be done by right, if some of these areas that we see just no other rational use can now be put to use.
Well, you can have by right and you can have by permit, and depending on where you put it would be how you label it. So one would think that in an industrial district, you would allow a solar array by right or be predisposed. In a general business district where you have other considerations and you might have, a residential property that might be a story or two higher than the array might be on an abutting property, you might want to do that after a permitting process to make sure that the array, it doesn't blind people on their back porches.
Yeah.
I'm just throwing out, so that's where you would look at the overlay district, and so in industrial, it might be as of right, and in a general business, it might be by permit. In the highway business district, you might put it as of right because those are large flat roof buildings, but there's a large apartment complex there.
Yeah.
That might want to be buffered from it, so.
This is what we're asking
That's we're asking them to come back and tell us where you would put it, how you would put it, and in time so that if it's something we want to do, we can put it on the warrant for the spring town meeting. And each of these things, to back up to as a teaser to Mr. Hill's report, these are the kinds of efforts we've talked about before to say to the residents, we know we can do the things we need to do. And it is seeing these opportunities and taking advantage of them and leveraging them into more revenue that we need to do. So something like this, where one person is coming and saying on one lot, well, it makes us think, why just there?
Sure.
And it makes his job easier because he gets more money to work with on his sources to pay for these projects.
So could you repeat the motion? It doesn't have to be verbatim, but just...
So the motion was, I think, to expand
To request the planner, the manager, the engineer, and the economic development officer to report back to the board on recommendations for sites or zoning areas where expansion of the solar overlay district would be desirable and appropriate.
Thank you.
Just a quick side question. We wouldn't just designate all commercial industrial?
You might not, and you don't know, and I can't tell you why. We don't know. Maybe you would, but maybe you wouldn't.
Okay.
I appreciate it.
Any more discussion?
That'd be their recommendation. Nope.
Yeah, they have the expertise. I mean, what we don't want to do is give out sunglasses to everybody in an apartment building because there's a solar array that shoots right up in their kitchen window, right?
Get Dirk Pitt on it.
Yeah. All right, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That's 4-0. All right, the next item 6. Anything else on that topic? No, the next item 6, Public Safety Building. It was nice that the chief came tonight. And so I thought I would put it on the agenda at the meeting and after the meeting. And since the meeting, I think we've each been contacted by people asking what we're going to do. I had more than one town meeting representative come up and ask us to bring it back at a different location. So I thought I would put it on the agenda for us to talk about how we want to go about it. We would have essentially 2 months to get our acts together with a new article, and then until May to get it done. One thing I'd like to say is that, as in response to one of the citizens' comments questions, we did have 2 sites selected, and unfortunately, those talks fell through. The desire was to have a site in August, but because of the way some of those things broke, we were not able to present that in time to work it through. I don't think anybody wants to do that again, but I also think we have to keep pushing to get a public safety building built. And to repeat, this is my own view, and I'd be pleased to hear if somebody has a different one. There are needs that we can't avoid dealing with any longer, both because of the personnel and equipment in both police and fire facilities that we have. Delay is not a friend. The only thing delay does is cost us money and limit our opportunities. Construction costs, site acquisition costs, design costs, every cost going into putting this building up, I think we can look at maybe being 10% higher a year from now than it is now, based on what's going on and what we saw with the water treatment plant. So if we want to spend more money later, delay makes sense. My sense is we don't want to spend more money later. And then it doesn't get easier because our options get narrow, as we discovered looking at sites. As property gets acquired, gets developed ahead of us, it's more expensive to do what we want to do. And my concern is that we have to find a way to deal with the conundrum. Do we want to pick a site that works well for the next 50 or 100 years? Because face it, that's what we're looking at, 50 or 100 years service out of this site at least, right? If that's the case, are we going to limit ourselves to property the town already owns? If not, then what parameters do we take to acquire a site? And since the site we offered was the #1 site based on the site selection committee that met criteria and gave better response time than the existing allocation of fire apparatus, where do we go? One comment I heard was the Armory. Well, we know from a facility study that was done from the Armory, we know because we read it, that, and from discussion, that the Armory is not a practical solution for the fire station. My thought is, let's get that presentation in front of the town here to talk about the Armory and understand whether or not it is feasible to convert that into a public safety building. And then I'll be quiet after I say, so what do you guys want to do to look into this? Mr. Hill.
So I think along those same lines as you're thinking, Mr. Chairman, we start to try and solve the problem, before defining it. So what I'm hearing from this special town meeting was that our question is whether we need a fire station or a combined public safety facility, and I think we need to go back and have the design group get back together again, and if it's a public safety facility, then they need to very clearly articulate the reasoning why. The surrounding towns that have done it, the economies of scale, the combined services under one roof, et cetera, et cetera.
And in connection with that, information that we have received, what I've talked, I can't remember if it was Ms. Muxian or Mr. Tisdale, was to get a more robust presentation from the police department on the inadequacy of that building. Because, people are correct in being upset that that building was put up so recently, and it's no good. Well, it was no good when it was put up. It never should have been built. Whoever said that building would serve its purpose, frankly, lied or didn't know the truth, because it's not working. And conversations I've had with command staff on whether and how that facility could be renovated, I get all practical reasons on why it couldn't and shouldn't be done, just because of the way the building was put together. It would be impractical, too expensive, and largely unproductive.
So it just goes along to the point that this board has made a long time ago, is that projects won't be built in town unless there's an owner's project manager. This was an ombudsman's project. This is exactly where somebody didn't go to Canton, but went to another city in the state of Massachusetts, found this design, said, oh, that'll fit, and put it there. Inadequate in so many ways, but we do have to justify what the issues are with the police department. It just is, as I tried to talk to this about this with town meeting reps, and we said, the chiefs both presented a resource planning model for both of their respective departments, and, that was just lost on people. If they didn't see that particular selectmen's meeting, then, that didn't exist to them. But more time and effort and planning went into how to figure this out, but nobody knew that happened. So we got to make sure that, if we got to buy airtime and take out ads and papers, then we need to get much better at marketing this stuff. So 3 points. Somebody said, why the sense of urgency? And Mr. Chairman, you've already hit on it. Number one, we continue to plow money into Freeman Street, and that's not our goal. By the time we get this built, we'll want to chew up another $5 million in that particular site, and that's not the plan.
We will easily put 10% of the cost of a new building into that wreck and get nothing out of it.
So sense of urgency, that's job one. Two, again, the water treatment facility is the poster child for this. We budgeted, we sent out for bids on this, it came back, and they're all over what we had estimated, that we already had pretty good guesses on what the estimates should be, by $800,000. Cost of construction's gone up. Every time, every year we delay, it costs us more money. So we're pumping money into Station 1, and we're prolonging construction because, for whatever reason. But then the decision that doesn't get made, and that's the profile here, is that we put these projects out, and then we find all kinds of ways to spin on them and not act. This board is reacting, and we're going to get this done, or not. But if we don't get it done, it's going to be a very conscious decision that it's not going to happen. The third thing is, well, again, the construction cost. So I'm saying that, the sense of urgency is because of not wanting to put more money into Freeman Street. Number two is because construction costs continue to rise, and we need to get this resolved. So we can't let it go. We've got the resources to do it. Now's the time. And that's all I have to say on it.
How?
Yeah, so the primary feedback I heard was that we should, the size of the building was too big, and I think that stems from the perception that we should simply replace Fire Station 1 and not replace the police station. I think that was the loudest feedback I heard. So to Selectman Hill's point, and your point, Mr. Chairman, that we should really outline the difference between doing simply a fire station, the joint public safety facility, and then what that cost difference will be, and really quantify it. I think the numbers in a very clear way will go a long way, as well as just outlining the need for the police department to be updated. And I think another way that could be supported is to look at, if we were to wait another 10 years, and project out if we started, the search for building a new police station, what that would cost us if we were to wait 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Because, as you mentioned, we're going to have to, fix that facility at some point. We know that Fire Station 1 is in dire need. The building's 100 years old. But there didn't seem to be that same perception of the police station. So I think that's a failing on our part in terms of presenting it and getting the information out there. So I think a clear, quantifiable example or presentation on that is what we need to do in order to get that information across. That obviously, that kind of limits our decision in terms of site selection, and because a lot of the feedback I got as well was, well, if you reduce to just the fire station, there's a million sites in town that you can pick to build this building on. I don't think that's necessarily true either, but that is one of the perceptions that's out there. So I think if we attack this head on, I think we have an obligation to present this at the spring town meeting and answer those questions that were raised and address the reasons that it failed in the fall. So I'm on board for doing that and assisting in any way. But I think ultimately quantifying and cleaning up that presentation and making it really clear and apparent to town meeting instead of just our meetings leading up, will go a long way.
Katie?
Yeah, so I mean, I've heard of many of the same things you guys have. So I won't just reiterate those points, but what I will say is that from the feedback I've gotten and also from what I've heard from you guys, there is a thing that you produce that people produce to remedy this problem, which is just to write a business case, right? There's a problem, we have a solution, here's the reason for our solution. The document doesn't have to be very long, a couple pages, make the appendix huge if you want, that outlines your justification. And providing that to town meeting members, well in advance. I think all of the information that we would need, we have at our fingertips. We just have to compile it. But the reason why are we doing a public safety building instead of a police station and fire, or just a fire station? The fact that the fire station is atrociously bad, right? To the point where, I just can't even, I can hardly talk about how inappropriate it is for having to have public employees living in this building. And I find it, I've mentioned this before, I find it very disrespectful that this hasn't been addressed decades ago. The fact that their building is in such bad shape doesn't mean the police station is just fine, right? In comparison, we would say, well, it doesn't seem all that bad, right? There's no feral cats living in it. Sounds like a good place, The windows close. I don't see what your problem is. But the fact is that they don't have, there's offices in closets, that they don't have the space they need to function. And we just cannot allow that to continue. And they're not going to get smaller, right? It's only, every year they're going to get larger. The demands that we place on them, that modern policing places on them, that issues that like the opioid epidemic places on them are not going away, and they're not getting any smaller. And they need the facilities to just do their job. It's not too much to ask. So, we know these reasons. I think we just have to articulate them in a clear business case that lays out the things people need. Now, the two places where I feel like, at least I'm going to speak for myself, I feel like I personally fell down and didn't quite adequately address. One is communication. That I think a lot of people felt that they didn't get enough information in enough time, and I think that that influenced the decision they made. And I don't know if we would have been able to get enough votes if we had been faster, but I think we would have gotten more. And I think that was something that I think we have to take pretty seriously. And that includes not only getting the information out quicker. This is nothing we could do about that. We didn't have the information until near the end. We pushed it out as quickly as we could. But people want it earlier. I think it's got to be clearer. And also, our presentation, I think, needs some additional components. I think that once again, I'm only speaking for myself. We've had previous town meetings where the police and fire chief would get up and explain the conditions of their building. We didn't do this time. I think there was an assumption that everyone's already heard this by this point, and there's nobody who should be ignorant of what they're dealing with. But I think we need this every single time. I think we need people to get up and testimonials of just how harmful this is to our reputation, our ability to do our jobs, for them to do their jobs, and that we cannot let this continue. The other issue I think we need to address is, this one I'm a little less certain about, because there were a lot of people who wanted to participate. They wanted town meeting representatives to be part of the search committee. I actually don't know if that's necessarily a good idea. Maybe it is. Maybe it's the best idea. I'm not sure. I'm not positive it is. But I think that the problem that they had was that they wanted to be able to, they wanted to believe, they wanted to like it, but I don't think we gave them enough an opportunity to sort of buy into this idea. And so facilitating that buy-in, getting them involved in a way that's meaningful early on, solicits their input, and uses it, I think will benefit everybody in the long run. So these are all things I think that people have mostly said and feel. This is what I've heard. And I think having a strong business case and a communication plan will get us a pretty long way. Thank you.
Let me ask the manager if you can consult with the chiefs and command staff in both departments on an approach to deal with the public information need for this. I think that if it's okay with the rest of the board, I believe that the public information need for Station 1 is clearly out there. The public information need for the police department is not out there with the kind of detail and articulation as we heard town meeting wanting to have. Part of that is when you look at the building, you know, it looks good and new. If you walk in there, it's clean, it's bright. If you compare the two buildings until recently, Mr. Cavy's comment, the windows closed, well, that's really real life for Station 1. They were windows that were not functioning.
I'm not sure it's entirely true for the police station.
No, for the fire, there are some windows there that
They may
work.
not open, actually.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a sealed building over wet property that had lousy ventilation. I mean, you know, and we dealt with mold issues in the building, even in the evidence room. So
if I might, again, I see us trying to solve the problem, and really just what we need to do is to have a better plan to present to the town about the police station, why we need it, and the fire station, why we need it.
So I'd like you, if you can,
Yes.
if the rest of the board, to talk to command staff about assembling the detail of the building they live in so that we can begin putting together that.
They've already done the work. I mean, we just need them to underscore it and maybe build out some more detail, but something that's easily understood, it's succinct, and it's something that's portable, and we can do it in 100 places. So.
And if it's all right with the board and Mr. Hill would like to do it, maybe the two of us can team up on putting this together. Between the downtown and the State Theater, your plates are pretty full, and my friend over here has 4 plates that are kind of busy right now. So if that's all right, we can get together and come back and get the upload from the manager. I would like to schedule some informal get-togethers with randomly selected town meeting members to get feedback from them and also impart sort of information that we have available to us and see and basically test it out and work all of this through the end of January so that we have something packaged. I'll put on the agenda for next week, if you please, an approach to selection and how we want to go about site selection again so we can begin discussing that because our window to get it done. There is a property that has been brought to my attention that was not available when we did the initial selection. It wouldn't be appropriate to discuss that in the public setting, but it was not available before, and I was alerted actually Wednesday that it was coming on the market. And the question was whether the town would be interested. So that would be something would be only appropriate at this point in executive session, but that might be something for us to take advantage of.
And I'm happy to talk to both chiefs. I do believe the police chief is out of her office for a few days. I'm happy to talk to the deputy, and I'm sure through the discussions, he's more than capable of briefing me and providing the information we need. And whatever public-facing efforts you want us to make as well to distribute this information once we present it here, at a board meeting, anything we need to do to further get that information out, whether it's through social media or a YouTube. I know you all do the YouTubes after, but whatever we need to do to get that information to the public to answer those questions as best as we can. I think, and as you said, the informal with town manager, but I'd like to produce something that we can produce here in a meeting format, but also something that we can put in a nice package for some outreach publicly.
And it might be that we present town meeting with our own option that says we would like to do schematics for a combined building, and once we do the schematics and get the bids in, it might be that we do it in phases, but unlike we'll build this now and then we'll design the other part later, those buildings tend to look pretty ugly. We do the design or basic design work now, and maybe we do one now and one in 10 years, but at least we have a concrete approach, and we can present options as we go through these sessions. That make sense?
Yeah.
So Rick and I will get together, and hopefully we can get together within the next few days and come back and tell you where we are, and then we'll put talking about site selection in executive session. To reiterate, this would involve property that is in private hands, so it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss any of that in a public setting.
Yeah, makes sense. There's been some questions that have been asked 100 times. We might want to consider doing an FAQ and just giving those answers right out in front, so we don't have to answer the question about the Armory 100 more times. We know what the answer is to the Armory. If it's just a fire station, then the answer is X. If it's public safety, then its answer is Y. And just another point, and you just brought it up, if you wait 5 or 10 years to Selectmen House point, there's going to be less sites available. So pure and simple. Why are we in a hurry? We can articulate that till the cows come home. Now's the time.
Actually, the time was 10 or 20 years ago.
We weren't there. We're here. Now's the time.
And my view is it's our responsibility to give town meeting the clearest set of options that we can give them. And if town meeting doesn't accept the options, we're welcome to other options, because these are the things the town needs to do. And my own view is these have to be affirmative decisions, not passive, oh, we're victims because nobody proposed it. No, we're going to propose it, and if the decision is what we have is better than what we could do, then that's where the vote comes out. And even if, and that's the best job we can do.
And the window we missed, if I can just close on this note, and I mean we've got to close on this note because we talked too much about some stuff, is that we have a plan to pay for it without doing an override or an exclusion.
And part of the method of having these rollouts with the seniors in January is because I was anticipating this conversation, and I was anticipating that we would be discussing these things in January, and how we're going to pay for it will be on the minds, particularly of that group in the community. And I want to have us with the answers. I want to have us ready with the questions. I want to be able to explain to them that this is something that is good, and they shouldn't feel concerned about it because they'll be okay, and we understand what their concerns are, and we're going to work with them so they'll be okay. I heard a good deal of that leading up to the last couple of weeks at town meeting, and we need to address that there's false information out there to the effect that we want to drive seniors out of town, and nothing could be further from the truth. Our costs of running the town are going to go up, or services have to come back, be cut back. So we want, if there's a need for an ambulance, we want the ambulance there within minutes. And if people's children and grandchildren want to get an education, the schools has to be there. It's all tied in.
Yep.
All right, thank you. So, item 7, the annual town meeting. Pursuant to the planning that we started in August, and then again some directive in October, we have received, this is item B, we have received 2 pages listing 12 categories of anticipated articles for town meeting from various boards, committees, and departments. They're mixed between operating and capital large items. I put it on for discussion. We don't have any items. I would think this would be, my own opinion, this would be the opportunity to indicate to the manager which of these items we think should not be pursued further as a policy matter. So the reason we put it on here was so that we wouldn't have staff time to vote it on something we didn't think would fly. And then if there are things that we, on the other extent, we think need more investigation and development, give direction, because we want that early on. So I open it up. That's why we put this on. Anybody want to deal with any of the proposals?
Well, it's 10 o'clock. I don't know that I want to start a capital discussion now, but, you know, I just look at spending $700,000 at the Council on Aging, and, you know, when I'm at those kind of thresholds, I want to step back and say, well, if I had $700,000, what would I do over there? Because, quite honestly, I think that all the public services should be over there. Maybe the veterans, the visiting nurses, you know, the Council on Aging, I mean, the youth services usually, it used to be just Council on Aging. Then we moved youth services in there, and it really kind of cramped their space. So maybe we should just relook at that whole thing and see, you know, we bought a piece of property over there, which I think would facilitate the parking, but it might be an opportunity to have just a little bit more discussion about it. But I just haven't had a chance to really kind of go through this thing and pull it down. I'm not ready to have a discussion about a capital plan today. Maybe next Wednesday, but we've got the water, I mean, we've got all the licensing to do.
All right.
Next Tuesday, actually.
Anybody else?
I think a few of the articles also might sort of be part of some of the budget changes in terms of just looking at even the very first page, if I can get back there. In terms of economic development, funding, and things like that.
Mr. Chairman, that gentleman in the back is waiting for the vote on Lucky Pizza.
Thank you. He was not supposed to be here.
So I wonder if maybe we do hold off on digging down into these until we hear about some of the changes proposed for the budget and from the manager and the budget team, and also go through that exercise that we went through last year where we have that spreadsheet and kind of just go through and talk about what our goal, our target is for the total cost of the articles that we want to borrow in terms of capital items before we go through and prioritize necessarily.
All right, so, Mr. Cavey, do you have anything? You just want to have received this and think about it and deal with it another time?
If I could, Chairman, just because of time constraints, I haven't even had the chance to go through that, and I know some of these were submitted by my directors. I haven't reviewed them, and I think to Ms. Howe's point, there may be conflicts within what we're moving forward on the budget, so I would appreciate if we could, the time that I can take a little time. I'd like to say I was able to get everything done this week that I needed to, but that really was not something I had the chance to review, and I might be able to help you weed through some of those more quickly once I get a chance to sort of review that in conjunction, particularly with some of the budget assumptions.
Rather than putting this in meeting time, if you're able to send us a memo on it,
Yes.
and then I'm not pressing you, so don't take it that way. I'll put it on the agenda for next week, just in case we have something we want to ask you.
Yep.
If you can't get to the memo by Friday, so we have it, I don't think any of us would mind dealing with this after that, but we'll put it on the agenda in case you're able to get to it.
I'll definitely target to get that done.
Thank you. Okay.
I'd just like to go over at some point the rest of the December calendar for our meetings, so before we close out,
Okay.
but anyway.
So, Sharon, did you send us the applications for the hours extension on Lucky Pizza?
I believe we did send it to you, but it is in the packet as well.
Okay. On the consent agenda, there are 3 items: to approve payroll and bill warrants and any other items to come before the meeting. The second item is for the appointment of the new town manager to a seat on the high school building committee. By regulation, the town manager is required to serve on the high school building committee, which means we are required to appoint her. And the third item is a request to change hours for Lucky Pizza. I believe they want to extend their hours to 1 a.m.
They want to open up on Sundays from 10 a.m. to 10 p.m.
Right, so I misread that. Anyone wish to pull any items? Hearing nobody, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So made.
Second.
All in favor of approving consent agenda items A, B, and C, say aye.
Aye.
That's unanimous. So that concludes the agenda, except for item 8, license renewal hearing for December 11th.
Can you also address item number 7A? We can always push that to another time.
Oh, I thought we did that, but I was focused only on the, when we got into the fire station issue. Thank you. Going back to 7A, is there anything that people want to add from what we can take away from the special town meeting?
Yeah, so I put something together that I sent you guys earlier today. It was, the scope of it might be overly exhaustive, right? But I think that year over year, we should be reviewing our process as we go into town meeting, at least the annual town meetings, and then get some feedback on whether there are any changes that need to be made. So I put together a list of things that would make sense to me. This is something that we would not be able to do. I was hoping to do this for the special town meeting. It can't be done. We don't have enough time to do it, and by the time we were able to produce something, it would be too late to implement it. But what we can start to do is compile some of this information so that after the annual, we could do it. And also, some of this involves town meeting representatives and standing committees, so we can also get the information to them. This is something we're going to be looking for. So as they go through their processes, they can perhaps take notes that would be useful ultimately for our ends, which is only to make town meeting a much more productive process. Right? You know, right now, I think there are some procedural impediments to the process that are frustrating members of town meeting. They're frustrating to me, and I imagine to a lot of, I know people from the finance committee, they're frustrating to them. So getting an idea of you know, who's holding the football from beginning to end, the timeframes. There are requirements by statute, either by Mass General Law or our charter, but there are also habits or just customs that have developed as well. Understanding those and getting an idea of what the flow of our process is, and then finding ways to improve that flow so that everybody's happy. Nobody feels like they didn't, you know, they're being the time was being wasted, or they didn't have enough information, or they didn't have it in enough time. All of these things can maybe become a little bit more systematic. And I think that this sort of regular review of our processes I don't know if it's ever been done. I think it's in the world I live in. This is done quite often. It has to be done. There's no way, you know, we're always finding ways to refine what we're doing, and I highly recommend it. So if you would, I guess just take an opportunity to review this at your leisure. Let me know if there's anything in there that you want changed, removed, or added, and hopefully we'll be able to start the ball rolling on, for example, mapping out some of the current state process flows of information, so that we know what we're looking at. We can see where the bottlenecks are, where the issues lie, where the stress points are, and then we can start to address those. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I think this is a great project, and I believe when we talked about our goals, either, nearly a year ago, or maybe it was like 8 months ago or 6 months ago, we talked about doing a sort of performance evaluation of the town meeting and sending out a survey. And I was also interested in looking at it from more of an equity standpoint in terms of what does our representation look like, and how can we improve the information that's getting out to, different populations that maybe aren't represented at the town meeting, or people that just the participation is low, or, just improve our communication, as you mentioned. So I think if we can start with this and then start getting people used to this sort of feedback analysis, I think that'll be a huge improvement in our service delivery. I don't know how much we have to work with, it's the town moderator's town meeting, so obviously we'd want to loop the town moderator in. But I'd be really interested in getting ahead of this for the annual town meeting, just so we can take a look at when information gets out there, who does it get to, and how can we do a better job of expanding that reach? Because there's a lot of, even just meeting agendas and postings and things, just as simple as being in one language or not accessible to those that are visually impaired. I mean, those are small things that we can do to improve access. So I'd be really interested in some of this sort of data collection and then using that to help guide some of the policy changes we make. So if you want help, I'm on board.
I didn't have a chance to look at that.
That's fine, that's fine.
I did. So, Mr. Cavey had talked to me about kind of partnering on this project, and I appreciated that. I took a look at what he had originally put out, and we didn't really get a chance to get together on it. I think it's a highly comprehensive program, and it deals with town meeting. I took a slightly different view of all of this, and I thought that what we need to do first is for us to kind of roundtable and talk about how we get better, because I think we have a bunch of opportunities for us to be better when we go to town meeting. This is our second one, and I think that we've made repetitive mistakes, and we need to get better about that. So how do we get better prepared and go to town meeting, not be at at the edge of the abyss because we have time constraints that, we have no control over, and figure that out. So I'd like to propose that we have, kind of a round table, a kind of whiteboard, what we thought happened in that town meeting, and what we can do as a board to kind of start getting ahead of it. I had some thoughts separately on the fire safety facility coming out of there. I wanted to get the votes from the town clerk on the folks that voted against the facility and do an online survey to them to say, what are you thinking, and, what would better meet your requirements and expectations. So probably 20 questions. I already started drafting them. And then maybe town meeting wide, we want to do something like that. But that's to the extent that I got to this on. So I had two levels. One was I wanted, I think that we need to get back to the fire safety facility and get what the folks are thinking there, and this is a pretty good way to do that. But more internally, I think we need to talk as a board and figure out what we need to do better, because I think we can do better about how we approach town meeting and manage through it. And, just to the point on agendas and posting, meetings and things of that nature. Well, there's software available out there that's a whole lot easier to manage than this chaos that we go through, and, posting it on the telephone pole downstairs. And, so anyways, I think that we've got a bunch of things that can help us here, but we need to talk about them.
Sounds like you're asking for an extra meeting in December.
Well, that's why I want to talk about the calendar, because as I'm looking at that, I'm thinking that we've only got the 11th and the 18th?
No, 18th.
No, so it's just one more meeting in December with all this stuff to do. I don't think it's enough. Just my opinion. I think we got a crap load of stuff going on with the budgets and the capitals and, some of this cleanup from the town meeting and trying to get a fire station, public safety facility out there. So I think we need more. And I'm hearing myself say that as I'm saying it.
You're not alone. I mean, I think if we want to avoid, as you mentioned, that being on the edge of the abyss and the sprint, you know, we're constantly moving at a rapid pace, and to increase it even more in January, just because, you know, we can't, we want to take maybe a couple weeks off. I'd rather kind of parse it out and, you know, have, like you said, that whiteboard roundtable meeting for a couple hours one of these days in the next couple weeks, and get some of the stuff done.
Well, do you want to meet on the 18th or the 25th?
25th is open, so
None of us has work that day.
it's going to be an all-day meeting.
Never say never.
Yeah, the 18th is fine.
So we'll schedule a roundtable meeting that night. We won't have hearings or anything. We'll just schedule a roundtable meeting, and we'll put on these kinds of topics to deal with that night. Will your capital projects evaluation be ready by then? Good, okay, so let's roll that out that night as its first showing, because I think that will help all of what we look at, particularly the public safety building. There was, to peel back to the Armory issue, you know, that is, why not the Armory, why not the Armory? Keeps cycling through, and between Mr. Tesdell, the manager, and there was a site assessment study done on the Armory 2 years ago. Last year at the annual town meeting, we put forward just a stabilization proposal the town meeting was not disposed to do. And part of what we did on that is to look at it to see how it would work. And just so folks know, that evaluation included whether the Armory could be converted as a permanent fire station. And then there was a question about whether the Armory could be used as swing space to get the fire department out of Station 1. And both answers came back no. So it might be good to slot, if not a special meeting, at least to, if you'll go along with it, to dedicate a presentation on that building, on the options that came out of that study, because one of the things we sort of were committed to do when we did our tour of town buildings last year was to cause affirmative decisions to be made on some of these buildings that have been, I can't say neglected, because allowing the Armory to be put into the deplorable state it is has by this time been an affirmative decision.
Ignored, not neglected.
Yeah, it has been, well, it's even worse than ignored. It's been backhanded. That the cost of bringing that building back is very close, if it's not already past the tipping point. So maybe we do, and Mr. Tisdale and Ms. Maxine, if you can check on the availability of staff to make the presentation on the alternate uses that came for that building, so we can get that issue in front of the town so they know its use for public safety or fire, what its use for public safety or fire station might be, what its next life might be based on what's been prepared. Those are questions we're going to be asked, so we might as well put it out there.
Well, do you want me to do that in conjunction with the memo, the police fire memo on why we need the station as well?
I think just on availability to make a presentation.
Separate from that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because then we can look at our timing on dealing with this. And I'm not suggesting that we have the presentation. I would just like to sort of have the team identified and see when they'd be available to do it. I don't see us doing it in December unless we do another meeting between Christmas and New Year's. But that's a building we need to inform ourselves of and a little more and inform town meeting on, because the questions keep coming back about it.
During, at the very end of the second night of special town meeting, one of the town meeting representatives took me aside, and he had some ideas about what to do with the armory. And as we worked through what he was saying and how something like it might actually come to be, it struck me that a lot of it, hopefully this isn't only because I've worked closely with the Energy and Sustainability Committee, but it did strike me that a lot of the things he was mentioning, finding, for example, a secondary or next use might involve, something like recycling, something along those lines. It did strike me that we might have committees in town that could actually come up with a concept for this, and also a funding source, a grant of some sort, that could benefit the town more widely. So I would be interested to see that possibly farming this out to other groups who might have some unique input.
I've been informed that Stoughton Media Access current lease is on the horizon of expiring.
Yeah.
And so, they explored that building, they wouldn't need the whole thing, and the cost for bringing it back to being useful for them was prohibitive. They'd have to make the whole building qualify for a certificate of occupancy, and if you've been in it, that's just unreasonable, but they might take a piece of it, and if they took a piece of it, that would be a funding source. So, would you like to schedule a dedicated meeting on the Armory and just tee it up and deal with it? Put enough notice out so anybody who wants to present can? Would you like to ask an RFP to go out on who would be interested in the Armory and what do they think they would do with it?
I'm always in favor of talking about the Armory, because again, my thoughts were is that should have been some kind of a youth facility. Perfect use for it, $2 million to stabilize the building today. But if you're going to spend $700,000 at the
Well, you read my mind.
Council on Aging for parking, then, let SMAC have some of it and have the youth commission have something of it, and you redirect that funding for it. Just another thought, but I just don't think we should be done with that facility. But if you're going to have another meeting on it, I can just see people with an eye roll. Are they not done with that place yet? We need to be very, again, articulate about why we want to keep talking about this thing.
Well,
It's a building we own that's not being used.
You're solving the problem. We know why. I think people out there don't, and that's why it failed. So again, we as a board going to be better at marketing, because we're not. We get a great understanding of it, but we just have a real problem translating it out to the general population. We're going to get better at it.
yeah, I think I've said this before, but it's zoned residential, right? So it's going to cost $1 million just to demolish it. And no one's going to buy that property, spend $1 million, and then put like a raised ranch on it. It's just never going to happen. So what can possibly go on there? I mean, it's got to be some sort of municipal property or state property. But or we have to rezone it. To, what would we possibly rezone it to, where only that small section could be useful? Finding a use that's appropriate for that site and the zoning is tricky. But what people have done, I've often said, like, the options are sell it, but who's going to buy it? Fix it, but that's expensive. Or the last option, which is really honestly the one people have taken, which is simply choose to let nature absorb the materials back into the ground, right? It might take us 300 or 400 years, but eventually we won't have an armory anymore. And so, I just find that one, that's what people have by default chosen. And it's completely ludicrous, that you do that, especially for something that's structurally sound. It's just, you got to put the walls back on. You've got to fix the roof. So making a case for this is something I think we've got to put up there.
So back to the question, do you want to have a dedicated meeting on that so we wrap our arms around it? It can be used as an education opportunity for the community and ourselves, and maybe there's an action item for us that can come from that
Yeah.
meeting.
Right,
And do you
so-
want to, do you want to do that in December?
So as we're saying yes to that, I'm looking at the 18th. And again, I think that we need to have the budget on the agenda there. We need updates, and we should talk about it. I think that we should have the capitals on there and presentations for that. And I think that we need another window for licensing. You know, Wednesday is kind of like do or die, and you're dead. So that's what I'm thinking about on the 18th. An agenda for a roundtable where we can talk about a postmortem on the special town meeting should also include the public safety building and also revenue strategies and financing strategies for the town to manage through the capital planning phases of some of the things that are coming up. So I see those as two distinctly separate meetings, but if
do I.
one of them is the public safety building, maybe we can also, I think you wanted to have a public meeting on that, Bob, is what you're saying,
On
right?
the Armory?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm just saying that, to me, that's a third meeting, which I'm okay with. And I know that we've been at breakneck speed, but again, I just don't want to roll into January and be sprinting and be ready, fire, aim again, and I think that's been our challenge.
I think that 2 meetings is doable, 3 meetings is not.
My chief concern is actually that if we're asking people to come with proposals, they're not going to be able to wrap that up in 2 weeks.
Well, again, we need to get ahead of some of this stuff so that we're not answering questions that have already been answered and get an FAQ out there. You know,
Yeah.
what study's been done, you know, what the proposals have been, and, you know, what its useful purposes are. So I don't want to talk about 2008, you know, what coulda, shoulda, woulda. If we think that a fire station should be sited there, let's talk about what we know and bullet it out as an FAQ. If we think it should be a public safety facility, why it won't work, or what would need to happen to make it work. And then if we think that there's an opportunity to use it for SMAC or youth services or other options, then, you know, let's feather those out.
Okay, so there's 2 chunks to that. One is in our public safety fire station discussion, what role does the public safety what role does the Armory have in solving that problem? That's one. And if after that discussion, and a second or third, or actually might be the 5th look at that, it's still not on the radar, then maybe we move to the fuller meeting. Well, now what we do, because it's not suitable for public safety or fire station use, what are we going to do with it? And that's when we open it up for the fuller event. Does that make sense? My concern is that these are things, once the budget comes in and we start working on the budget and the articles in January, that we will not have time to do. You know, because what's happened in the last several years is to get through the budget and the budget hearings with the department heads, we've gone 2 nights a week for 2 or 3 weeks.
If I could just, the one thing I would say about the Armory, the public safety one's a little easier to move forward quickly. It's just a regathering of information. And I think the site question is the executive session question that has to be answered up front anyway, because if that site's off the table, we're back to square one in some ways. If that site's on the table, it actually changes the Armory question a little. My suggestion, I know you don't want to push this too far into January, the Armory, but what I would like, if possible, is a little bit of time to look at all public buildings and facilities and where these things are and what we're spending money on and where our programs are located. I haven't had the time to, and I apologize for that, but to get a tree.
What, are you new here or something?
Just a little. To just get a handle on what we have where, what our inventory is. I mean, we're looking at inventory of private space that's available for the public safety facility. We know we probably don't have anything except possibly this discussion of the Armory. But as we talk about potential uses for the Armory, whether it goes out for an RFP or whether we keep it internal, I just really would prefer to work with Paul and Mark on a sense of what we have, where everybody's located, are there more efficient ways to put town government together even? And before we make any decisions too quickly, I just feel more comfortable working with you all and being able to make proper recommendations to you.
Sure.
If I have just a little bit of time to do that.
We don't want to pressure you. If you want to just let us know, you know, when you're ready, what your time horizon is. I think if we approach it, Armory for public safety or fire station first.
Yes.
And then that'll take us at least through the 11th, if not the 18th. That would still give us time in the next 2 weeks, if we want to, in December, to schedule a public meeting on Armory, what now, what then. And if that's something that staff and you in particular aren't ready to deal with, we have to respect that.
Yeah.
I mean, the worst-case scenario on that is it would bump into January a little bit, but I'm less concerned about the budgetary impact of that than the potential with the capital on what we're presuming with a public safety facility.
I can't agree with you more that the key pieces of information are the capital plan, because as that's coming together, it's impacting how we're going to budget, right? And what we're going to spend on as far as capital projects and how we're going to deal with taking on new debt after retiring debt. And I think it's, of the priorities, that's the first one to plug into our approach to finance, particularly on the public safety / fire department facilities. So roundtable December 18th on the items we've discussed. We'll decide either the 11th or the 18th what we do on a dedicated meeting on the Armory. That make sense?
Sounds good.
Yeah, but I'm concerned again about the budget capitals and the licensing. And
The 18th,
you're going to do all of that plus the roundtable?
budget?
Licensing
Capital?
and capitals.
Well,
See, I thought we should have a presentation on the capitals from the department heads, make the case, and that was kind of a kickoff. But, kind of not a 3-hour program either. But I think the roundtable is its own 2 or 3 hour meeting.
well, looking at the items that we got on capital requests from the departments, the largest one is water capital for $3 million. The second one is engineering for Park Street is $800,000. Then there's fire department, which we knew we were coming for a new fire truck. And then the second year under the facilities master plan. I don't really know how long those are going to take to go through.
I think we're just simplifying it too much. There's a lot of money to be spent here, and the cases need to be made, because we're going to get very frugal, in my opinion, about these capital programs and what we're going to spend and not spend, and when we're going to do it, if we do it. Maybe.
And that's why I'm asking that's why this week I'm happy we're delaying on that, because I really want to weed through those before, and it was just a matter of directors knew they were supposed to get them in.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really in place at that point, and I want to take a hard look at those before we even, I don't want to say waste the time, but before I waste the board's time and the public's time with things that I don't even feel comfortable recommending, and other things that I may feel very comfortable recommending.
Well,
Right, and we should
let's slot. We know what's coming up on the 11th. Most of the night on the 11th is going to be spent on the license renewals. And let's slot for the 18th as the primary things, further review of the budget and the capital presentation. And between the 11th and the 18th, as the manager provides us more information on where she is on the other open items, we'll deal with that scheduling.
Oh, the 11th to the 20th, right, to the following week from Thursday. So I wouldn't limit ourselves to just, anyways, I'd say to the 20th.
I have a meeting of the Downtown Task Force on the 20th, and a meeting of the SRAs on the 17th. The public hearing for the Malcolm Parsons Building's the 12th. We have a high school building committee meeting on the 13th. That's early, so we could meet after that.
Yep.
Just to give you, the other days are Fridays and holidays, so.
Busy.
Just as a heads up.
Yeah, see.
It's also weekends.
Can't we add a day to the week?
Still have not fully ruled out the 25th, so.
Well, let's approach it this way. We're not going to be able to do much between now and the 11th except follow up on what we've done and get ready for the licensing renewals. And then on the 11th, we can pick up with that on what we've got ready and when we want to do it. I'm going to anticipate we meet on the 18th and anticipate that the two principal topics will be budget and the capital plan that Rick is working on. And to the extent we can get into one a roundtable discussion on the 18th, but that's still a soft agenda, because if we wind up having a further meeting in December, we can manipulate these things.
And you wanted the public safety update in a memo form anyway, for Friday if I can, so that wouldn't tie up meeting time,
Only
will.
if you can.
Yeah, no, we'll make the effort to
With
get
what I
that
just
done.
heard, it sounds like the 19th is our only other option to meet after the 18th. So just throwing it out there, based on Christine's schedule and stuff that, you know.
I know the 11th is heavy, but I may be able to do a preliminary, a blush at that Capitol. on
Too
the-
soon.
On the 11th, too soon,
And that meeting's going to be hugely busy, based on what we went through last year.
with licensing?
Oh, my
Okay.
God, yeah.
No, the licensing,
It's just too, it's, okay,
just, yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I mean, we could do the 13th, 17th, 19th.
You know, this is all scheduling, we can
Yeah.
do this, you know, and work this out.
I'm just worried if we don't lock on a date, then we're going to, all of a sudden, more obligations are going to pile in. We're going to lose windows of availability for people's schedules because it's a busy time.
Is the town meeting roundtable as timely of an issue if that went into January? The town meeting roundtable issue, is that as timely, is that on a timeliness issue if that moved into January, if you run out of time?
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly one of the ones that I think the deadline's a little bit, that we can push out. I mean,
But it's important to deal with, because
Yeah.
as we work in January, we want to approach setting up the 2019 annual town meeting to address the problems we've identified and solutions we have formulated.
yeah. I mean, it could be the first thing we discuss in 2019.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say that that's probably the most flexible of what we've got going on here, so yeah. if
That
had
might
to
free
push
up-
out-
that might
if
free
that
up
had to
some
push
time.
out to the 1st or something, then yeah.
All right.
It's another holiday.
Robin, you were the only one that picked up on that. by the way.
I jump in the ocean on the 1st, so I might be a little cold and a little wet, but I'll be there.
All right. So
Bless you.
Did we talk long enough about the schedule?
I think we did. Would anybody like to talk longer about scheduling?
I like talking about schedules.
I hate
me
to
started.
break this to you, but it's probably appropriate for a motion to adjourn.
So made.
Is it?
Second.
Thank you.
All right. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous. Before I gavel us closed, there is, each member has received a listing of the current status of licensing applications. It would appear from looking at the listing that all of the, we have applications from all of the license holders, just some are missing, as I said in the beginning of the meeting. And when our agenda is posted for the 11th, the listing of license holders will be appended to the back of the agenda by class of license. So if anyone wishes to be heard on any one of the classes of license that we will deal with, I'd ask you to let the office know, or if you come to the meeting on December 11th, check in so that if there's no objection from the board and your particular license or property, we have, I think last year, something like 118 licenses to go through. If you're here to talk and your license is number 113, I think we would all wish you to let us know that you're here for that, and we'll do our best so that you don't need to wait through 112 other licenses to be heard.
I think we got 126 this year.
Okay, so
But
please, please, if you want to be heard, come and let us know that which license you want to be heard of so that we can not hold you up. So the next meeting is,
Is this thing clean enough, ready for publication, or
what, the budget?
the licensing?
No, the licensing is this one.
I don't know, what's this thing? Budget analysis, sorry. But that thing, is that ready? Should we just post that for people to see, or no?
Not ready, no.
Still trying to get a couple.
All right, so the next meeting, December 11th, at 7 o'clock. Thank you all and good night.